welcome back from your coffee break. Please take your seats. Some people are still coming in, which is great. So we're going to start. First of all, we're going to be talking about the future. Okay, so that's very exciting. Future that we're shaping today, quantum computing, as you all know. We had a super cool preview of this session. The previous session touched on quantum a little bit, and now we're going to, dig deeper and also, hopefully you guys have a lot of questions to ask. We'll try to go through as many questions as possible. We'll try to leave them for the end of the discussion, but if somebody is like really burning with a question, then do raise your hand during the discussion as well. But, we're not going to be doing it too often, of course, to get through all the topics here, and we've got a lot to cover. So first of all, let's watch a really exciting video that GESDA put together for us. That was exciting, and especially the music, right? I think we should have danced to it. Anyway, welcome again. My name is Katia Moskowicz. I am the communication lead at IBM Research in Zurich. So yeah, I came here all the way from Zurich, super far away, 2.5 hours by train. I'm sure all of you traveled from further away. So welcome. And before I introduce our panelists here, we have a stellar panel, really super great. Let me show you the questions that we would like you guys to think about and answer whenever you like it, but probably better towards the end of the session, using your Slido polling tool. So if we could have the questions on the screen, please. All right, so while you're listening to the panelists and thinking about the questions you would like to ask them at the end of the session, also think how you would rank in order of importance these three aspects, right? What is more important for you and would be in the future? Access to benefits of quantum technologies, open access to research infrastructure, or education and awareness raising. And it would be good to hear why as well. So what's this? Let me introduce you to our panel. Many of you probably already met Anusha here, Anusha Ansari. She's the CEO of X Prize Foundation. And by the way, did Anybody here know that she went to space? That's amazing, right? I mean, I met her yesterday and I was like, oh my God, this is my childhood dream. I've never done it, but here I'm sitting next to a woman who has done it. So unbelievable. And I'm not just mentioning it like that because actually we're going to be talking about space and quantum later. So there is a connection there. Fabiola Gianotti, our amazing Director General of CERN. All of you, of course, know CERN. You're in Geneva, right? So if you don't visit CERN, at least take a picture in front of it because it's doing amazing things. Nicolas Gisin, honorary professor at the University of Geneva. So you guys didn't travel far, right?
Yeah, but I came by bike.
Yay. Okay. Elham Kashefi, now that's going to be a long title. Professor of Computer Science and personal chair of quantum computing at the University of Edinburgh, and also the director of CNRS and co-founder of VeryCloud, correct?
Correct.
Good. And finally, next to me here, Matthias Troyer, distinguished scientist at Microsoft Quantum. Welcome, everyone. So the first question, so as you guys all know, the topic of the discussion is quantum for the benefit of humanity. But just by a show of hands, can you tell me here, do you think quantum computers are going to be beneficial for humanity? Who thinks yes? Okay, all right, roughly half the audience. And who thinks that we are not quite there yet, we don't know what we're doing, and we need to kind of be thinking a little bit more about policy and stuff? Okay, good. Perfect, all right, so with that, as I know, many of you are probably not, quantum physicists just yet. Why don't we ask Nikolai here to give us a really brief high-level overview of what is actually quantum computing? What are these qubits, and how are they different from bits? Just a 2-minute 101 in quantum computing.
Well, 2 minutes. Okay, it took me 30 years to start understanding a bit. So I'm sure you all have smartphones, and you use them, and you don't understand how it functions. And that's okay. And it will be the same with quantum computers. You don't need to understand how it functions. But still, it's good. I think it's a good feeling, and I think it's very important that everyone has a bit of an understanding of what is going on. For instance, in your smartphone, you know that you have bits, these 0 and 1s. Saying that you're also transmitting over optical fibers and so on. So bits, we all know a bit of bits. Now we go to quantum bits, the so-called qubits. And qubits, the first thing I could say is that at the same time, they can be in the state 0 and in the state 1 in superposition. Now, if you have a feeling that you have understood what I just said, it just means that you didn't pay enough attention. So it's complicated, but let me make it more complicated. If you have now 2 qubits, instead of having 1, of course, in your smartphone, you have gigabits and so on. So let's have now 2 qubits. And now this superposition principle tells you that not only can they each be in state 0, so 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, they can be in superposition of all of that. So it becomes more and more complicated. And actually, each time you add a qubit, because now you can add a 3rd one, a 4th one, and so on, each time you add one, the number of parameters you need to really describe all that doubles, just doubles. But doubling each time, that's typically an exponential increase. Now let's suppose you have 300 of these qubits. 300 is a big number, but we can all imagine 300. However, the number of possibilities, if you have now 300, so the number of parameters you would need to describe that is about the same size as the number of atoms in the entire visible universe. Now, the entire visible universe is huge. And the number of atoms is, of course, unthinkable. And obviously, a classical computer will never be able to do more than the number of atoms in the entire universe. But now if you go quantum, just 300. Now I'm talking 300 perfect qubits. Probably later we'd say that the qubits that we really make are not perfect, but let's stay on the high level. So things are perfect. 300 in a line or in a lattice, whatever. Then you have as much, in principle, computer power as if you would have a classical computer of the size of the universe. So that starts to tell you that really the superposition principle, which I did not really explain, because there's no way to do that in 2 minutes, no way. But you have to understand that because of this superposition principle, pretty quickly, if we start increasing the number of qubits, you get to a computational power, which is just unthinkable. And that's where the promises and probably everything that we're going to talk is coming from. So try to remember superposition principle. This is what is changing everything when you go into quantum.
Thank you, Nicola. So what are the promises of quantum computing? What will we be able to do with quantum computers? Maybe Matthias, you can enlighten us on that.
Thank you. So that's something that I was asked just a decade ago. And then I talked to the experts who build these quantum bits. It turned out not many people who build the hardware had thought about yet. That's one theme and why there's a prize coming up also about kind of what will we do with it. And then I also talked to the theorists who thought deep about the math of quantum computing. But one needs to marry the hardware one builds with the theory and the applications for humanity here. And 300 perfect qubits, as mentioned, is something that I cannot simulate on a classical computer ever. So it has the potential to solve problems that I can't solve. But the question is, which are these problems? Which are the problems that I can solve with that machine, but that I cannot solve classically? And with that potential of this being so powerful, there's lots of your wishful thinking. Hey, that could solve all my problems. But then you have to start thinking about how do I solve it? What is the program I can write? And digging into that, we found that there's really a big application that's huge. And it may only be one application that's good, but one application is good enough. Namely, it can change all of chemistry and material science. It can help us predict the properties of materials accurately. It could let us design a catalyst for the carbon fixation, which we can use to undo the global warming. It can help us find new materials for batteries. Superconductors, it can just change fabrication. So just by being able to simulate materials better. Now, why can it do that? And why is that hard classically? Simply because every single atom here in the table, in the air, so works on the principles of quantum mechanics. And quantum systems, as mentioned, have the property of your superposition that is hard to simulate if you have a classical computer the size of the universe even. But if you have just a few hundred qubits, then you can do it. And so the idea is really that if you want to describe a quantum system like a material or a molecule, a catalyst or something, then you better use a machine that works on the same principles, on your quantum principles.
Yeah, that's what Richard Feynman said.
That's the
exactly
application.
that. I don't know if you guys all know the famous quote by Feynman. When was it? 1980?
82,
yeah. Something like that. Yes, he said, if you want to simulate nature, you better use a quantum computer because nature is not classical. I think he also used the word "damn it" in the quote. Let's not get into that.
So that's the big promise here, and that's why we want to build the machine.
Exactly. Great. Well, you know, as we all know, quantum computers, they do exist, right? And companies, as we saw in the video, like Microsoft here, Google, IBM, and a bunch of startups around the world are all working on different approaches to make sure that quantum computers one day become better than classical computers and, you know, really solve all these problems that Matthias just outlined here. So they could be better for chemistry, to create new molecules and thus new materials, new drugs, right? For optimization problems, for travel, if you want to travel from point A to point B and you want to, you know, find out how to optimize your journey, quantum computers would be better suited for that. finance world as well. But we are not quite there yet, right? Because we haven't reached this point of quantum advantage just yet. So Anusha, question for you. What do you think, if we were to reach quantum advantage, say, tomorrow, are we actually ready for it? Our world, our society, if the technology suddenly were to mature tomorrow, are we ready for it? Are the companies ready? Can we just go and say, okay, I'm going to use that machine to solve my tasks at my job? Or what's your view on that? And if not, what do we need to do to get there as a society?
It's a great question, and it goes to the heart of the work at GESDA, because we are not ready. We are not ready because most people don't know about it. They don't know how to use it. There's a huge skill gap that exists today. Even the companies who are working on it have issues hiring the right kind of talent and skills they need to actually advance the technologies. You know, what worries me is that the small number of people who are working on it will be persuaded by governments to work on military applications and applications that we really don't want to see, because that's where the money is and it can be done in a closed dark room and no one can see it. So that's what we're hoping, and you know, this group is hoping to accomplish before we get to that point that computers are ready. Let's start working on some applications. Let's use that to educate the world and experiment with it in a safe, controlled fashion so we can be ready when it comes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, education, I guess it's super important, isn't it? Because right now, if you ask a high school students whether they know what a quantum computer is, I guess many of them will look at you with a completely blank face, right? They won't know. But so, you know, what about workforce development? That's another thing. And retraining of workforce today, only a handful of companies, for instance, at IBM and at other companies as well, there's already access to quantum computers, but only a handful of companies actually are using it. And only people who are really enthusiastic about quantum are trying to, you know, to work with quantum algorithms or work on hardware. So another thing that's important, right? And you mentioned it is collaboration as well. So Fabiola, you, of course, you're the perfect person, perfectly positioned to talk about collaboration as you're from CERN, and this is what CERN is all about. So what's your view? How should we continue working with quantum technologies going forward?
Yeah, thank you very much. I heard several times some people, even people in this audience, talking about you know, a CERN for quantum. So should we base our development of quantum computers and their deployment on the values that CERN embraces and is promoting? So what are these values? First of all, of course, the importance of fundamental research. And I would like to open a parenthesis. We will not be discussing here today this question of, you know, potential technologies, new technologies related to quantum, if people about a century ago had not developed quantum mechanics. And I would like to stress that at that time, quantum mechanics was considered useless knowledge because it had no applications in normal life. You know, quantum mechanics has to do with the world of the, you know, the very small, which has laws that are completely different from our macroscopic world. So clearly, sometimes with paradoxical situation, etc. So fundamental research, it was also mentioned yesterday, is really important, and one never knows what are the impact that fundamental research will have one day, but we can say there will always be an impact sooner or later. So fundamental research. The other point is collaboration. Collaboration in various aspects and in all its facets. Collaboration among people and borders. The challenges of a new technology like quantum are quite daunting, and only by collaborating across borders can we hope to advance this technology quickly enough. In addition, beside that, the challenges to which we would like to apply quantum computing, you mentioned some of them, from health to environment, etc., are global challenges, and again requires collaboration across borders. So this is the first thing, collaborating among people, nations, etc. Second type of collaboration is between different disciplines. Challenges and technologies nowadays require really pulling together expertise and competency. So in quantum computing, you have, first of all, physics, quantum physics, you have cryogenics, you have new materials, you have, of course, software and computing itself. So collaboration between different disciplines is essential, and I think is one of the main lessons we also learn from the pandemic. Third component of collaboration is between different sectors. So private sector, we have here a representative of private sector with public sector. So at CERN, we have this very nice Open Lab initiative where we collaborate with the private sectors and we exchange information. We work together, we fund young people, we educate them, we train them, etc. So between public and private sector. But collaboration also with civil society, with policymakers, etc. Because of course, I guess at some point we will touch on the policies and how we are going to regulate, for instance, the use of technologies, because of course, it was just mentioned that maybe the first application that government would like to push is on security and maybe goals that may be less noble than education, etc. So these are important things. And the last but not least is open technology, open access, and open education. So open science, open technology, and open education are fundamental. First of all, for science itself, because it boosts developments. If you can share information among scientists, if you can share data, if you can share knowledge, of course, developments will be faster. But also because knowledge and education are capacity building and empowering tools, they must be available to everybody if we want to reduce the inequities across the world. And we know very well that, well, you mentioned education, and it's not just educating people in the developed countries, is also paying attention to the developing countries and those that are really not on the front of technology, etc. Otherwise, the fate of quantum will be, as for all other technologies, to increase the gap.
Yeah, those are all great points, Fabiola. Thank you. I'm sure all of us agree that, you know, especially speaking of policies and security, right now, AI, for instance, yeah, take AI, it's still maturing, right? Even though we are frantically talking about ethics and AI and policies around AI, but it's just tiny bit too late, maybe we're just playing catch up. And as you mentioned yesterday when we met privately with Anusha, she said to me, yeah, well, what if we, you know, put quantum into the mix with AI, then where, you know, it's just going to be exponentially more critical to talk about the policies and security. So I'm looking at, you know, because you work with security a lot, right? So what's your view? How can we, especially if quantum remains open access, right? But how can we make sure it's secure? What should we do? What should governments do on the national, international level to make sure that this emerging technology is properly regulated?
I get a tough question. Okay, so about security. So I guess I can start by saying that everybody think about quantum being disruptive. You know, quantum comes and break RSA and the world collapsing and we need to do something about it. But as always people said, quantum gives you what it takes with one hand, it gives you with the other hand. You know, this gentleman next to me has set up the ID Quantic, which is known in Geneva, which is another alternative solution to give the answer to the quantum security. So it's good, you know, coming to the big question of what you're saying about security. It's true that everybody in cybersecurity and about the access, about everything, they need to be concerned because there is a new tools come to the usage for the good, for the bad, but it also there is a potential of enormous new things to play with it. You know, now taking that little qubit that Nicola was talking about already, we can actually do completely revolutionize the notion of security, and we can take it further in our own company at Very Cloud. We actually can give secure access to the cloud. Right now, everybody talking about the cloud access to the computation, and then you need to regulate it, who is getting access, who's not getting access, how are we going to share the knowledge? There is all this regulation coming into place in Europe that you're allowed to share your data, but maybe you're not allowed at some cases share data, but quantum gives the solution. Quantum has solution for all of this thing in a completely refreshed way of saying it. So I just say in terms of policy making, we need to be widening our view of not just to look at the 0-1, to look at the superposition of opportunity and the threat, because it goes hand in hand. And I think we're just at the beginning of it. In this topic, we can, you know, talk forever about it, but is a new opportunity comes with the quantum we should not ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so policies on the government level is one thing, but education, as we just mentioned, is another thing. So, Nicola, you work at a university. So what do you think? How can we change that? I mean, right now, people who work in quantum computing, and even judging from IBM, people who come to us, they're mostly, you know, they have their PhD in quantum mechanics, be it quantum computing. Do you think it should remain like that, or should we introduce quantum computing on some level to students earlier than that?
Well, so for sure we should introduce and let high school kids learn about quantum physics. Today we have enough understanding that we can teach quantum physics on a relatively easy, mathematically easy level. It's conceptually complicated, but the mathematics are relatively easy. So we could start indeed earlier, and I think that's the first thing to do. Also about educating not only the advanced countries and the rich countries. On the theory side, the theory is not something very expensive. Making a quantum computer is expensive, but understanding the principle and developing algorithms, these are things which are not so expensive, and that could be done really on the entire planet, and should be done on the entire planet. I would maybe also say that I'm not too optimistic when I see that Switzerland, that sits in the middle of geographic Europe, is actually disconnected from all the rest here. Isn't that completely absurd? And it's not a matter of money here. It's a matter of, I don't know, are there some policymakers here?
Thank you for that. And speaking of collaboration, Matthias, so you come from the industry side of things, right? Do you think we should continue public-private collaboration and also collaboration between industries when it comes to quantum computing? What's your view going forward?
Yeah, so until 5 years ago, I was at the ETH in Zurich doing research, and I got to the point where I said, I need a quantum computer. And so to get there, let me help build one. And that's why I moved and now try and build one. And we don't yet know what will ultimately be the best way of building it. We don't yet know what else we can do with quantum computers. We can build quantum sensors that are better. We can do randomness and encryption as mentioned. So there's lots one can do quantumly that we still have to find out. So of course we need to do research, but we also start to build things. And we need to collaborate because building a quantum system is complex. It's the theory of it, the fabrication, the material science, the control electronics, the software on top of it, the applications, the cloud services, the security aspects, the applications. So this really cuts across all disciplines. And that's what I like here, that we can really collaborate here.
Thank you. And
can I jump on that?
Absolutely.
Because I want to emphasize that it's actually the perfect time to do that collaboration. I mean, I'm super excited that GESDA started because, let me tell you a history. It's like when I started some time ago, hearing people like Nicolas Gisan from Physics Experiment talking with, pioneer like Nicolas Santa on algorithm, and these people talking to each other, algorithm computer scientists with physicists in one room, really talking, this was almost unheard. And quantum is really came out of this crosstalk between computer scientists, mathematicians, experimentalists, theoreticians, and we completely remove those boundaries. We can talk together, we can really educate ourselves. And right now, exactly the same conversation should happen at the policy level and at the industry. That, okay, I understand an industry need to give access to GPU and charge and have a business model, they have investors, they need to really raise the fund. But at the same time, they need academic to come with the application for it because it goes hand to hand. So I think it's a very good time. The history of 30 years or 40 years of culture that we build, that we don't call anymore ourselves computer scientists, mathematicians, physicists, experimentalists, and etc. Now call ourselves entrepreneur. I'm happy to be an entrepreneur. I'm happy to be a scientist. I'm happy to be sitting and advising government. And it's exciting that GESDA has done it. And I think it's really important to continue that because we have not reached yet to say that, okay, the job is done. So
Absolutely. And Fabiola, would you like to add something to that from, yeah?
Well,
CERN?
I wanted to add something to what Nicolas said about education. So I think, and training. So I think the problem is much broader than just quantum. We do have a problem today because we lack talents in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, because maybe you all know that the number of STEM jobs nowadays grows 3 times faster than any type job, other job type. And yet in Europe, for instance, I don't know in the US, but in Europe, only 20% of the high school students decided to study STEM at the university level. So we need to attract more young talents to science. We need in general to communicate science better and technology, because also quantum, as was said before, people are scared. Quantum is going to destroy the world. I'm used because at CERN, I heard this several times, we will swallow the world with a black hole 10 years ago, and we're still here. Okay, but apart from that, so we need really to increase the trust in science. We need to increase the love for science and for technology. And I think one of the aspect we could leverage is the fact that science is absolutely necessary if you want to address successfully today's challenges that go from climate change, environment, energy, and many, many others. So scientific knowledge is fundamental. So, and the young people are very sensitive to this. So I think we need to make an effort, because we are not really preparing tomorrow's workforce and tomorrow's society.
Thank you for that, Fabiola. So I think we have time probably for just a couple more questions here before we open up the floor to discussion. And by the way, let me also tell you that we're going to be joined by another speaker, just really briefly. Sir Peter Knight is going to join us to kind of give his view on the topic. He is going to be joining us via video link. He's a professor of, I'm sure many of you have heard of him, but he's a professor of quantum optics and senior research investigator at Imperial College London. So as soon as we have him on screen, we'll give him an opportunity to say a few words as well. But before we do that, Anusha, I wanted to ask you, as we promised, the space link, right, to our audience here. How could we use quantum computers for space? We mentioned materials, right? For instance, if you were to go, if your next space journey takes you to Mars, for instance, do you think it would be a good idea to use quantum in the future to maybe find new materials to protect the spacecraft from radiation? I don't know.
Yeah, I think almost every aspect of what we discussed that has an application here on Earth can be used in space, especially, you know, since we're not going to solve our climate issues, we need quantum computing to build a whole new society on Mars or someplace else to be able to, change the environment to our needs if we want to. But I think also in the area of research and, researching our universe and the questions that we always struggle with, the origin of the universe, how the universe was formed, and the simulations that we've been doing. One of the powers of quantum computing is simulation and reducing error in simulation once it achieves its ultimate, potential. So I think it will be a great research tool for astrophysicists and astronomers, on top of helping us build new material that can protect us in space. I don't want to talk about human augmentation, but that was another area that I think materials that our body is not made to be in space for too long. So there will be enhancement that can be made with new material and new health knowledge to our body to make it more resilient in the harsh environment of space.
Great, thanks for that. So I wonder if Sir Knight is ready now to join us.
Hello, folks. I don't know if you can hear me. Let's see if we can try and summarize what we've heard so far. I wish I was with you. Of course, I was unable to be, but I've been observing from a distance. Quantum might have appeared to some of you who are not in the field as a fairly academic and exotic enterprise. And I think you've heard enough now to know that it's not, and it really is created in revolution. But as Nicolas said, it's a revolution that's been a long time coming, at least 30 years of research by a large fundamental research community has actually been at the heart of everything that we see. But what we've seen now is science developing into technology, exquisite engineering that's generating new prototype systems under control. But we've really heard from many of the speakers that quantum is a total game changer. And it's a game changer that's been recognized right around the world. There's over 22 billion has been invested worldwide by governments by 2021. And it's become a kind of international race, fueled sometimes by the fear of missing out. So we've got to be extraordinarily careful about avoiding hype. But quantum will affect us all. You've heard from several of the speakers about how it's going to change things. It changes in particular our perception of what hard problems are and the nature of hardness. It's an enabler for so much that we've heard from many of the panel speakers, but we know it's also a threat. And I think I want to disagree with something that I think Fabiola said, security is less noble. I think I picked up the quote. It isn't. Providing a resilient infrastructure by which we can trade and communicate is a noble enterprise. And quantum is actually delivering on exactly that. It is a noble enterprise because the enabler for us all to stay connected is one of the most noble things that CERN generated. Right, so that's my little disagreement so far. What we do know is quantum computing will put public key infrastructure at risk within about 10 years. So we won't be able to rely on TLS or RSA, for example. So the need to be able to trade and communicate reliably is really important. So to generate quantum safe economies is truly a journey that all of us need to be engaged in. It may well take 10 years to be sure of resilience, but then on the other hand, it may only take 10 years to develop a quantum machine at size. So we've heard from everybody that one needs international cooperation. And I fear one of the dangers in this is a quantum nationalism that inhibits the kind of cooperation that all of the panel speakers wisely have stressed. Many of the things that we need to be able to do require the skill base right across the world to actually deal with some of these things. I think that one thing we need to be able to do is to bring in all these various disciplines that were stressed by Fabiola, quite rightly. We need to bring in people from such a wide range of disciplines to realize the potential of this enormously transformative technology. It will affect fundamental science because it gives us new tools by which we can see the world around us. I was struck by the mention of space, and it will be an enabler. For example, if we could actually put some quantum sensors into space, we concentrate rather a lot on quantum computing, but quantum sensors in space may actually be able to map the geoid and see how the world is changing around us. So there's much that one wants to be able to look at in this space. I think that the comment that also struck me is that we should actually engage with the next generation, with high school students, and certainly right around the world, we've seen ways in which the if you like, the quantum enthusiasts like us can start to communicate with that younger generation. I've found that they are aware, that they do read about what's going on in the world, and they find quantum physics absolutely challenging, but stimulating, and something that they really feel that they want to know more of. It's not going to be an issue. I think we will find that we have a recipient audience. Let me finish by saying that we got to be careful about the hype in the area. And I think Matthias has actually been very wise in pointing to the fact that some of these challenges are long-term. What do we do with these qubits? How can we use them for substance? It's important not to be able to give signals out that we're going to change the whole world immediately and overnight. Things can be done. It's a long challenge. It's not an immediate generator of solutions for all of the global things that we need to do, but it has huge potential for this. And I think that what we've heard today already around the panel is that this transition from a vibrant research community stretching back more than 30 years, into a new technology which is transformative, is a wonderful adventure that many of the brightest and best around the world want to join in on. Collaboration is the name of the game. We really do need to avoid this premature quantum nationalism. So that's my summary comments on this. I've been sorry that I've not been able to join you in person, but I really have enjoyed listening to everybody on the panel today.
Great, thank you so much, Sir Peter. And we also, of course, miss you here, but hopefully maybe next conference, if we're still talking about quantum, and who knows, maybe we'll have a functioning quantum computer by then.
Let's meet before.
Thank you very much. And now, why don't we hear from our audience here? So where are the microphones? Why don't we start with this gentleman here? And then we go back there. Yes, great, thank you. So first here, please, thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks. Fantastic panel. I'm Andrei Schwer from Malta. I've spoken to Nicola a few times. So I'm a curious being in that I'm both a quantum physicist and I'm ambassador for digital affairs in the country. So I kind of straddle the two sides of the divide. I've just got a couple of comments / questions. I'm not sure what to call them. Superposition. And one thing is to pick up on this education issue. I'm a father of 2 young daughters, so I'm kind of sensitive on this particular thing. We, as quantum scientists, often like to say, quantum is this crazy, wonderful thing. But part of me thinks that we focus on the weirdness because we didn't grow up understanding quantum. And you see kids dropping things on the floor to learn the laws of mechanics, basically. I mean, if you want to call it that. And I just wonder whether we can take the high school approach even further back. And if we somehow bring quantum and other kinds of new technologies to even younger kids, then they will learn an innate sense for how the universe works in a different way than we did. And that could make them a sort of a quantum native generation, so to speak. And my gut feeling is that we will not realize the power of these machines. We will not get a proper generation of quantum computer scientists, so to speak, until we do that, until that generation grows up. And my second bit is to link to this, and beyond the hype, I get the feeling that sort of focus on quantum computing applications. To me, it just feels like we're in danger of missing the woods for the trees, in the sense that we have this focus. Quantum will be able to develop new materials, but actually, it might do that, but that's not really the important thing. So, developing quantum machines, developing the technologies, everything else will change the world, even if it doesn't develop new materials, even if we don't manage to crack all these problems that we are kind of marketing as the key applications or the killer applications for quantum. And I was lucky enough to be given a guided tour of CERN this morning, actually. And that's the one thing, one of the key messages that I took. If you look at CERN, we didn't, as humanity, set out to say, let's build a particle accelerator because we're going to invent the World Wide Web or something silly like that. We just did it for the science, and we knew that it was going to create new technologies. We just didn't know what. Whereas if you read the literature now surrounding quantum, it goes application, 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 and we need to solve these problems first. And I get a feeling that it is a bit misguided in this sense. I'd just like to see what the panel thinks about this. So thank you.
Can I say something about your first point? My son, 10 years old, and he's exactly example of what you're saying. And whenever I argue with him, you should not do this, you should not do that, he will say that there is a parallel universe, that you accepted me, that I had this ice cream, we do not have this argument, and we are happy. And I think it's exactly an example of what it is. For him, it's very normal to think in parallel universe, quantum, superposition, and speed up, and bringing complicated problem to me. Mommy, can you solve the problem of poverty using quantum? So I fully agree that you need to give that tool. And as Nicola was saying, it's simple. There is some of the basic things of the weirdness is not that weird when you tell it from the young age.
Any other? Yes, Nicola?
Yeah, maybe I can also to emphasize here. So we can today capture an atom in a trap, and we have it in the lab, and we can see this atom, can talk to him and so on. And then we go back home, and the next day when we come back to the office, or to the lab, the atom is still waiting for us there. And we can again communicate with it. And the next day again and again. So somehow we become friends with this atom. And this is something relatively simple. You could have it really in high school. And you can really not talk to the atom like I'm talking now with sound waves. You have to talk to these atoms with electromagnetic waves, lasers, that you have to shape in an appropriate way, like I'm doing now with shaping these sound waves that you can hear. So you can indeed communicate, and you have to learn the language of this atom. But then the kids can start with 1 and 2 and 3. I mean, if it's a small number like that, it's not that complicated. And you could really have an interaction and become friends with these atoms. And then you want, or I hope that then these kids will want to go into quantum, and of course then go to the real difficult stuff with many atoms, and where the atoms are at a distance and you can still try to connect them, entangle them, as we say, but whatever. But you can start with 1, and 1 is actually something we could do in high school. It's not difficult.
Thank you, Nicola. So we had a gentleman just here in the back. Yeah, thank you.
No, I am not a gentleman. I am a failed scientist and a bad citizen. But my question will prolong the question of the gentleman. More than half a century ago, none of you were born then, in Geneva at the Rencontre Internationale, Professor Joseph Maria Yao, who was a professor of quantum physics then, he said that the Middle Age has given to the world, to heritage, the cathedrals, but the 20th century has given also cathedral, invisible cathedral, abstract cathedral, quantum mechanics. So of course, such a religious parallel might be double-edged, but it was very telling. 1 or 2 generations later, we could read in the newspaper that even the fathers, I don't know if I should call them the inventors or the discoverers of quantum mechanics, said indeed we never came to term mentally with quantum mechanics. We discovered it because it exists and we apply, but it's still a riddle to us, which is not a reason not to try to understand it, because after all, if I am not mistaken, the Big Bang and the Standard Model are quantum mechanics in action. So if the riddle, the question I'm trying to raise here, normally quantum mechanics should be to science what Shakespeare or Victor Hugo are to literature, or what Beethoven and Wagner, or Verdi for those who don't like Wagner, are to music. But it is not part of our cultural heritage. And there might be some reason. I remember, I must confess to Fabiola, I don't like CERN, but CERN showed a very nice theater play 20 years back in the Globe. It was fictional lecture exchange of Dirac, very abstract, but it made dream. So why is it that quantum mechanics is not to our culture in science what the other monuments are? Is it worth? Is it possible? Just a last remark. When I was young like you, 80 years back, it was very easy to read about relativity. Einstein himself, although not a communicator, had made a wonderful small book to explain relativity theory. It is not as easy to do with quantum mechanics. I don't know if the same does exist, but it's also a question I ask.
Did you read my book?
I can't afford. No, but thank you. I will rush to the bookshop.
Thank you. So,
Can I reply? Maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay, so despite you don't like CERN, I will reply. So I agree with you. I think quantum mechanics is the foundation of the world, if you want, and at the most elementary level, the most fundamental level, and should be actually taught, as we heard before, at high school, but even earlier. And I don't know why the programs, the school programs, are not advanced enough to also include a little bit now, maybe because we think that kids are not clever enough. I don't know, because kids, of course, you know, the peak in the number of neurons is 3 years. So, you know, clearly they could learn almost anything. And I take the opportunity to make a little bit of publicity about CERN. Apologies. We are building a new educational and research center called the Science Gateway, which will be a complex of buildings, and one of the buildings, one of the pavilion, will be devoted to the quantum world. And this center is made for everyone, but for kids starting at the age of 5. So there will be hands-on experiments like observing individual atoms, or in our case, you know, having a trap of antiprotons and things like that, starting even with the youngest kids. And I think we have to multiply this kind of initiatives.
Absolutely. I mean, I know, Anushya, you were talking in the previous panel about the competition you guys are launching. So this is also a very great educational tool, right? And maybe you could say just a couple of words about it now for those who were not in the previous session. But at IBM, we also have Qiskit camps for kids, right? Not many people know about that, but there are opportunities. It's just not everybody's talking about it, and only those who are really interested in quantum are lucky enough to find out about it, but it's not widely known, unfortunately, even though anybody can go and work on a quantum computer even today for free, right? You can access it online and you can do it for free out of your own house. And actually, we even do video games. You can program a video game on a quantum computer, which probably many of you haven't heard about, right? But it's quite amazing. But why don't you say a few words actually about the competition?
Sure. So the competition, I'm sorry, but it is focused on application because that's what's tangible right now. I think you're right that there's a lot more work to be done, like Matthias described, on the fundamental science that's required to make a true quantum computer possible. But that doesn't mean we cannot get familiar with it through the application. So we're going to use this opportunity with the competition to educate the world and introduce the world of possibilities with quantum through application development to solve some of the challenges, examples that we've discussed here. To also just touch on the education for young people. I come from a place where I got really interested in physics and science in a country where women were not interested as much at that time. And it was the awe and wonder and the sense of imagination and curiosity that comes with science. And sometimes we make science so complicated and so dry that kids feel like it's too difficult. I can't understand it. It takes too much time to learn it. And it's not true, because if you become interested in it and really get curious about understanding how things work at subatomic level, it opens up this whole new world to you. And we need to just focus on that when we're in classrooms, not focus on the knowledge itself, but the delivery of the knowledge. And I know you chose to go into the journalism route and talking about science in a way that everyday people can understand it. And that should be the approach to young kids, and get them really curious about it. And that will do their job for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. And yes, I did go into journalism, but before that I did engineering. And after that, I also did astrophysics. So it is possible to do a variety of disciplines and combine them, and especially from the young age, absolutely, if we introduce them early enough. We have 5 minutes left. So one question, and then we go to the poll that I hope you guys are all answered the 3 questions from the beginning. Or maybe we could get the questions already on the screen. And why don't we go to the gentleman in the back? Thank you. Gentleman in the white gray shirt there. Thank you.
Hi. Actually, first of all, I would like to say, unlike my friend Boris, I do like CERN very much. And I'm so happy we have it here in Geneva. It's a real privilege for us. But like him, I'm a journalist. My name is Marat Shogorsk. I'm based in Geneva. And I have a question. I mean, it's great you're all talking about collaboration, between universities, companies, etc. We have seen this July, I believe, that the Chinese have built the most powerful quantum computer. We know that the Chinese government is putting billions into quantum research. Now, what you think about it? I mean, can it be collaborative? Are they going to share something, or are they going to use it? It's like a race where they want to prevail and use it for some means which might not be so friendly, like they do in some other cases.
That's a great
With
question.
technology, especially, well, you understand some of there's artificial intelligence to face recognition with Uyghurs, which is not exactly what maybe you would like that quantum technology might be used for. I'm not saying they're going to use this for face recognition, but just in case.
Thank you. Who would like to address? Yeah, Matthias?
Yeah, so this is a great question. There's a race going on here. There's also always the need for open basic research. We need that because the field is young and we always need to collaborate. We're also at the start of the race because while we have about 50 qubits now, we need a few hundred perfect qubits. We have a few tens of noisy qubits, and you can make them perfect by using many of them, but we need to go to millions of qubits. So it's a while and a long race. And as we enter that race, there is the danger that mentioned by this night that there's nationalism. So, but that is just counter what we said about outreach, education, to the public good. We want those machines to be available to the whole planet for the good use, but we can also use it for breaking crypto. So there's this bad use. And what we have to find with the diplomats here is a way for how we can keep the good use open globally while protecting us against the bad use and not stopping collaborations, not stopping the public global access. So that's where GESDA will be able to help us because we want to build up something open and we face this threat.
Thank you. Would you like to add something to that maybe?
Maybe not exactly that, because I think Matthias covered it, but the issue that's raised and regard why quantum application versus quantum hardware, I think is a wrong debate, because the whole field, if you look at it, quantum computation comes that we use application-oriented question to re-understand physics.
Yeah.
You know, we understood non-locality thanks to the quantum key distribution much, much better, and seeing it in practice and actually implementing it part of it. So I think it's not quantum application hype that somebody doing it, but actually thinking about the application, and hence this launch of this program is actually helping to the foundation of the physics, it's helping to the construction of it, because it's going to be a co-development, it's going to be back and forth, it's not either the other one. And I think it's actually, I'm very excited that the decision has been made to go for the quantum application in a much wider one, because it's asked question that maybe physicists was not able to ask or focus on that. So I wanted to just add that to the discussion.
Great, thank you. With 1 minute left, could we go back to the polls and just see what you guys thought about what is actually more important? Open access to research infrastructure, access to benefits of quantum computing, quantum technologies, or education and awareness raising.
Need superposition of all three.
Yeah.
Or we can just do it by a show of hands. I mean, if that's easier.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Okay. I think it's all of it that we need.
Yeah, it looks like it. So all of that is important. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you to our distinguished panelists here. And if you have any other questions on quantum, I'm sure you can approach all of the guys here or myself as well through LinkedIn, email, etc. Because quantum is very, very early stages, and we need support from everybody. Thank you so much.